Attention inshore saltwater anglers, good news and bad news. The bad news is we are raising the price of the Salt Strong Insider Club by almost 50%, 50 here, very, very soon on June the 1st. The good news is that you can get in today and grandfather your rate in for life. So that means if you're a current member, this does not impact you at all. You are already grandfathered in for life at your rate. So you've got 30 days or less, depending on when you hear this, to get in the club, lock in your rate, because as soon as June 1st hits of 2024, we are raising the prices. After not raising them for 8 years, we have some really, really, really big news coming with smart fishing spots and essentially a fishing guide in your back pocket everywhere from Texas to Florida to New Jersey and everywhere in between. We're going to start giving free Slam Shady for life to all our members, free tackle to test out every single month, and a whole lot more. You do not want to miss out. So once again, if you're a current member and you're in good standing, you are completely fine. Your rate is locked in for as long as you're an active member. But if you're not, this is your last chance to join before the prices go up almost 50%. So join today at saltstrong.com. Here's the podcast.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. We are back, and we got a couple cool stories here. The first one I think we'll get into is this one lure, 12 months, how it changed this person's life who I have on the podcast. And also after Pat ended up, starting off as just a weekend warrior angler and then ended up getting really good and then becoming a coach here at Salt Strong, he and his wife decided to get in an RV and cruise all over the Southeast. I mean, literally started in Florida, went Texas, all the way back up to Virginia and fished using, some of our lures and techniques that we taught, everywhere and proved that it worked everywhere. And that was really, really cool, documented the whole thing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the big reasons I want to do this is Pat has become very popular as a coach. And obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you've seen him there many, many times. And a lot of people, I found out, don't know his whole story. And it really is fascinating. And there are some just absolute gold nuggets in this in terms of what you can learn as an angler to become better really, really, really fast. So Pat Ogletree, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate that. And this is kind of a cool thing. Normally we're out here talking about fishing tips and stuff like that, but there's a lot of stories behind the scenes that, will help you become a better angler. That is not necessarily about lure selection and color and, all that equipment stuff. But, you talked about the one lure. So what I did was back in 2020, everybody had a pretty bad year that year, but I decided to do something that I've actually done before in the bass world, but I've never done it with the inshore fishing. And what I did was I decided to pick one lure, one style of lure, and I'm going to fish it every day for an entire year. And that's the only style of lure that I'm going to use. And I chose topwater. So for 12 months, from January 1st of 2020 till December 31st of 2020, I threw nothing but topwaters all day, every day, no matter what the condition was. And the reason why behind that is, it's one of those things. If you want to be an artist, start painting. If you want to be a writer, start writing. If you want to learn how to fish topwater lure, start throwing a topwater lure. And I wanted to make sure, I wanted to get the nuances down. I love fishing topwater. That's one of my favorite things out there. There's nothing better than a topwater blow up, but I was really inconsistent in, when to use it, when not to use it, how to retrieve the lures, what lures work better in what situations. So I went out there and, I'm fishing, topwater lures, whenever it's the worst possible conditions to throw topwater. Talking about, in, January after a cold front, it's 32 degrees outside. Nothing's going on top. But, I use that time to learn how to work a lure. If I twitch it this way, or if I twitch it that way, this is what the lure is going to do. If I tied fluorocarbon line instead of monofilament line, it acted this way. I learned how to twitch certain lures a certain way. And by the time I got a lot of repetition in there. So what happened during those slow months, I by the time that the topwater bite turned on, say that late spring or that early spring, mid spring, right around there, I had a lot of these baits dialed in and I had a really good year. But I had to go through those pain points in the beginning. I had to, learn how to do all this stuff and, get my equipment down right, get everything I need. Now, I do love throwing topwater, but what I've learned from that is the fact that I know when not to pick it up. And sometimes that's, the most important thing when it comes to fishing is knowing when to use stuff and when not to use stuff. And there's people, if anybody that's known me for a while, they know I love throwing top waters, but there are sometimes I'll absolutely not throw them because I learn when they don't work. So that was a really cool year. But a lot of people ask, how did you do that? How did you, go a whole year, say you're fishing for an hour, 2 hours, you're not getting a bite. How did you keep that up for a whole year? Because it was a mindset change. The difference was I had to change what a successful day meant to me. What a successful day meant on that day. Did I learn something new about using that topwater lure? So then I can move on from there. If I took my days and measured its success by how many fish I landed, yeah, I probably would have, bowed out a long time ago. But it was all about changing that mindset and learning something new every single day. But that's something I apply to my fishing all the time. Any day I go out there, I'm trying to learn something new. But that's really what it is. It's about your mindset. So if you're struggling out there, just kind of check that and reevaluate what your mindset is at that current moment and see what success means to you. If it's just going out there and having a good day out there, maybe getting a bite here or there, you're going to be able to do that. But if you have some really audacious goals of going out and catching, your personal best snook, trout, and redfish all in one day, you're probably setting yourself up for failure there. So definitely keep that in check.
Yeah. What were some big takeaways from that year? Like you mentioned, there were some certain times or different scenarios where you learned not to use top water. What were some of those?
Yeah, basically, anytime, in the wintertime, you get that cold front that comes through, that water temperature drops down, those fish are going to go down to the bottom. They're going to stay down there because that's where the warmer water is. Not really a good time to use top water. Now, you can catch fish on top water in the wintertime, but it's very selective. You got to, wait for those warming trends, especially if you get a really long warming trend in late winter and those fish get more and more active. Yeah, you can throw top water there. But really, one of the things that a lot of people really don't think about is the retrieve when it comes to top water. There's all different kinds of retrieves. So, if you're saying a walk the dog, like our moonwalker, for instance, a lot of people have one retrieve speed. They go out there and they kind of work it really fast. But what happens is if you're fishing one of those days where you're seeing big fish being blown up on the top, but it's one of those bluebird sky days, a lot of times days like that, you want to slow it down. I'm talking about twitching that lure and letting it sit for 3 or 4 seconds, and then twitching it again, letting it sit for 3 or 4 seconds. So the retrieve has everything to do. If you were to take a day like that and work it normally like you're twitching it constantly, you might not get a bite. But if you change your retrieve up, you can have a stellar day. So retrieve is just as important as anything else, if not more important in some cases.
Yeah, that's really good. I've seen quite a few newer anglers who will join the Insider Club. And, we have an awesome community where it's interactive. You can ask questions and coaches like Pat get in there and answer. And I've seen a somewhat of a trend where newer anglers, and I think a lot of them are ex-bass anglers, because this is what you're kind of taught in bass is, carry 12 rods and have every possible type of lure and color of ready. And they're going out there with this just arsenal of tackle. And my reply back to them is maybe not as extreme as what you did, but hey, for a month, if you're going to fish once a week, only use a paddle tail lure or a jerk, whatever it is that you're comfortable with, and get at least one lure to become your confidence bait. Like you said, you learn a lot if you use one lure. Even for a month or two, you can learn a ton a year. You learn a whole lot, and you truly become an expert at one. And ironically, you're at least from what I've experienced, your catch ratio will go up once you do that. It might not at first, it might, but over time, once you have that confidence lure, man, everything changed when I had a confidence lure. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is one of the most important things that I think it's for anybody that's transitioning, either you're starting fishing or you're going from that freshwater to that saltwater, is unfortunately with the fishing industry, we're really we're marketed to a lot. So, you got to have the latest and greatest lure. You got to have the newest color that comes out. You got to have, here's this lure, and it's this size. But the problem is really the focus that it should be is the stuff that's not really that, it's not advertised a lot. That's finding the feeding fish. And that's what we try to do here at Salt Strong. We help you find the feeding fish faster. So what you can do is you can actually take, and I know, all of those coaches, Tony, Luke, myself, Matt, we have confidence baits. And we'll talk about this a little bit later when we're going about, me traveling around the country. I fished everywhere from Texas all the way up to Virginia. And there was 2 lures I threw most of the time. And that was either a 3.5-inch paddle tail, our 2.0 paddle tail that we have, or our Prawn Junior. And I know in most situations, if the going gets tough, I can put fish in the boat with those 2 lures because I've fished them enough to know when to use one over the other. And that's what we need to do. So the beauty of having a confidence bait is what you can do with that is, you can catch fish on that lure. So the mindset now is to find the feeding fish. So you're not worried about if the lure's the right lure, or if you're fishing it at the right depth, or if you're got the right color on. You know that you've caught fish on that lure, and that's your go-to. Now it's about finding those feeding fish. So you're not thinking about that lure anymore. And that's what we need to do. And to be honest with you, I did the same thing whenever I was bass fishing. I did 2 years. So 1 year I did nothing but soft plastics. I was pitching and flipping soft plastics for an entire year. And then the next year I was throwing spinnerbaits. I threw nothing but spinnerbaits for an entire year. Here's the sticky point. I got so confident in those 2 lures that I never moved on from anything else. But I could go out there and put fish in the boat every single day, because I knew when to use each one. And with each one of those things, they shined in a certain situation. I knew when I ran across that situation, this is what I need to do. And when you have confidence like that, then, it opens things up. And a lot of your really good, your professional guides out there, your really successful tournament anglers, they have that confidence bait. And that's what you should do. You should work on getting that confidence bait, and then everything becomes easier at that point.
I love it. All right. We're going to talk about this whole trip from Texas to Florida up to Virginia and all the learning lessons there. Before we do that, I want to make sure no one's listening saying, oh man, I can never be like Pat. He's probably been a pro his whole life. Let's go a little bit back in time when you were making that transition from bass angler to inshore saltwater angler. What was that like? And how did you get better fast?
So this is the funny part. So my dad wasn't a fishing guide, and I didn't grow up on a lake, fishing all the time. I love fishing. I cherished the moments that I had, but I wasn't on the water all the time. So I did bass fish quite a bit, and then I kind of got out of fishing a little bit. Life, career, that kind of got caught up with me. But one day I was fishing. I took the family camping and went to Fort DeSoto. And we were camping over there. If you've never been there, beautiful place. But we had these cheap inflatable kayaks, and I decided to sneak out one morning and do some fishing. And I went out there, and I was fishing with a topwater lure that I found that was caught in a mangrove. It was like a Zara Spook Junior or something like that. It was white with a red head, the kind of classic you see around. And I caught my first redfish. And here's the crazy thing about it is when I caught that fish, I knew that was it. That was like a spark in my life, because I could care less about catching another bass again, man. That redfish was and it wasn't even anything spectacular. It was like a lower slot, 18, 19 inch, but it pulled drag, it ran me around, pulled the kayak around. I was stuck. I just loved that, that feeling, and I wanted to do it more. So at the time I owned a bass boat. I actually went home, I sold my bass boat, bought a center console, totally wrong boat, but I'm ate up with redfish. Now here's the problem. After that trip, and I never told anybody this, I went 2 years without catching another fish.
Wow.
2 years.
Well, without another fish or another redfish?
Without another inshore fish of quality,
wow.
Like anything that you're targeting. Well, at that point too, I'm still heavy in my career. I'm not fishing that often. I'm fishing maybe once a month, so I'm not getting a lot of use out there, a lot of time on water out there. But remember that promotion that you guys had where it was, I forget the names of it, but you had names for different types of fishermen, and I like tackle terry or something like that. Yeah. Well, I remember me, I was Dead Spot Dan. I was fishing dead spots too much. That was my number one thing. But to go back to how I found Salt Strong is being a bass guy. We didn't use leaders. I was having problems with my leaders, and I found Luke's video, the FG Knot video, where he was tying it on the poker table. And, that was getting millions of views right now, but that's how I found you guys. So I started following you, and I became a member. Well, shortly after I became a member, that promotion, that thing they had about the dead spot Dan, then things started to catch on. It's like, oh, I'm fishing redfish like I would fish bass, where I would, find a shoreline that looked productive, and I would fish that thing for 3 or 4 hours straight and not see anything. But I dove right into the courses. I started doing the Finding Spots Mastery course, the Redfish Mastery course, the Positioning and Approach Mastery course, and then things started to fall in line. Now, again, I wasn't going out there fishing every single weekend because, I didn't have the time. I would go out there once, maybe twice a month. But every time I would go out there, I would get progressively a little bit better. I started catching trout. And then I realized that, maybe I'm a little bit too deep because I started spooking redfish off shallow. But every time that I would go out there, there was something that I learned from the community, because each time I would go out there, I put a post in the community. They were pretty lengthy, to be honest with you. But at the bottom, I would put 3 things that I did right and 3 things that I did wrong that I needed to work on.
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of the 3 things that I did wrong was, if I kept writing the same thing every report that I'm doing these wrong, it kind of just buried in my mind that, hey, I need to stop doing this. And one of the things was fishing dead spots. That was my problem. So I was spending too long in these dead zones because it looked good. There should be fish there, but there actually wasn't. So going through the courses and the reports and the feedback that I got from the community allowed me to become a more successful, more consistent angler. And that's where I got to the point where, now I'm trying to dial in the bite. That after a while, that's when I started doing that top water thing, and trying different lures, and definitely my success rate went up for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did not know that full story about the 2 years of probably very frustrating 2 years, especially when you have the boat. And we see a lot of people like that, right? That they finally make that leap, buy your boat, and now you got, even if you don't have a boat payment, you still got to store it and all the stuff that comes with boat ownership and stuff. Ironically, breaks the least amount that the less you use it. And there's nothing worse, at least in my opinion, than having all of this stuff that you've invested in and not being able to catch fish. And I mean, that's a big part of why we all are here, right? I mean, Salt Run exists for that reason. Luke and I had the same thing. It was years of trial and error, mostly error. And we're like, man, we want to unlock some of that for people, to help people save time. I remember someone said, I love the quote. He's like, I'm too busy to be a bad fisherman. He's like, I'll spend anything to not be a bad fisherman. I was like, that sounds about right. The older you get, the more you kind of respect and cherish your time. That becomes more and more true. So,
yeah, the community, and this is all happening before we even have smart spots. So right now we have smart spots, which really, you want to talk about accelerating your learning curve. I mean, that's it's such a good tool. But we have a map even back then. It's called the regional map, which is basically it's a map of the United States as a pin. Anytime somebody puts a report in the community, they drop a pin in there, and then you can click on that pin and it brings up that report. There's so much historical data there that you can get a feel for what should be happening, what was working, what wasn't working. You can eliminate bad water, get good water, and then that helped. That's kind of what I dived into, was in that. But then of course, after I hit the road, smart fishing spots came out, and that. That alone right there is just, we see the reports in the community all the time. Hey, first time using smart fishing spots, it was dead on. We, put a boatload of fish on. So, it can really, really, the person that says they're too busy to be a bad fisherman, that's what it's for.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to a member today, actually, that lives in Florida, but goes up to Charleston, South Carolina a couple times per year. And he's like, thanks to smart fishing spots, he's like, all I do is I pull that sucker up, and first I hit oyster bed. He's like, the first thing I do. I know oysters in South Carolina, and then I do now the 1 foot contour lines. He's like, I'm looking for little ledges that have oysters nearby, and that's what I fish. And he's like, and I don't crush it every time, but he's like, I've yet to be skunked. I'll always catch fish, even when I hear some locals saying they didn't catch anything. I was like, that's smart. I mean, that's why we created that app. So let's talk about the next chapter in your life. So you found us, you became a better angler, much better angler. You did the top water thing, you get hired by Salt Strong. And one of the first things you do is, hey, I'm going to go travel the country to prove that this works. Talk about that whole experience. I don't think we've ever shared the whole thing with everybody. So. No,
I don't think I've ever told this story before. So and that's actually, when little further back, I had actually sent an email to you. I had a 27-year career almost 30-year career. I was happy with my job and everything, but I just didn't, it didn't fill a purpose in my life. So I felt like it was just time for a change. And I remember just, sending you an email and said, hey, one day I want to work with you guys. And I think you called me in like 5 minutes. You called me right away, and we had that conversation. So we worked some things out, and I had finished some things on my end, and we worked out a timeline. And, come, I think it was December 21st or December of 21 is when I started. Went to go hit the road, wind up in the hospital with COVID. So that was the first, that was like my first month with a company. You guys took care of me. I can't thank you guys enough for that. But finally, and again, so what I did was, my wife and I literally, we have a home here in Orlando, and we sold everything we own. Like I told my wife, if we're going to do this, I'm not going to put our stuff in storage and wind up paying more for storage than what is in that building work. We sold everything. So everything that we own fit in a moving box, and we put it inside the RV, and that's all we had, just sentimental stuff that couldn't be replaced. So we sold everything. We hit the road. So my wife, myself, my cat, and my dog in an RV, and we go hit the road. So first stop, my goal for that first year was I was going to visit 9 states, and I wanted to catch a redfish in each one of those 9 states. Self-guided, where I find the spot, I caught the fish. That was my goal. Well, Louisiana was my first state that we were staying in, and I only had 5 days. This was going to be, I had to find fish in 5 days. That was it. And it just so happens that it was kind of terrible timing. And this is another story I've never told anybody. So it was terrible timing. We get there, it was like 2 days after a really strong, one of those nasty cold fronts. Water temperature drops, air temperature drops. And I got to go to a place I'd never even stepped foot in Louisiana, and I got to go find some of these fish. So I went to the Hopedale Lagoon, beautiful area if you know the place. So I'm out there at Hopedale Lagoon. I launched, it's 32 degrees, and I'm freezing. I'm from Florida. I'm not used to that. I'm in my kayak. I'm in a place I've never been before, and I got to go find fish. So I get out there, and an hour goes by, nothing. 2 hours go by, nothing. 3 hours, and just this keeps going. No signs of life, nothing. Bait, no fish, no birds, no nothing. And I'm like, okay, I got to make this happen. So I keep thinking back, okay, what did I learn in these courses? Okay, wintertime, maybe I need to go back up in the marshes, find some deep, bayous in between these drains. There's, deeper water. There's got to be some fish there. So I go back there, nothing. And it's like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I know I don't have much time left. And it just dawned on me. I stopped what I was doing. I remember I put my rod in my lap, and I thought to myself, I'm like, I just ended a 27-year career. I convinced you and Luke that I can do this. I took my wife, put her in an RV, sold everything I own, and I don't know if I can do this. And I was at a loss. I'm like, wow. I can't believe I did this. Wow. And just then, I see a redfish tail pop up.
What?
You want to talk about divine intervention? I mean, that was absolutely
got goosebumps
100%. Yeah, it was crazy. So I wasn't very, very far away from it. I just had to scoot my kayak up a little bit, and I was behind this island. I could point the island on a map, I know exactly where I was at that moment. So I see the tail come up, and I tell you what lure I was using, a Brazilian prawn on a Texas side jig at 1/8 ounce. Send it out there, and sure enough, it goes out there, lands right on the back of that redfish, blows it out. And I'm like, I just blew my only shot. This is it. This is the only shot I'm going to have to land a redfish, and I'm like, I was devastated. So again, I reeled it in. I kind of was having a moment, and then sure enough, that redfish turned around, tail went back up. And then I'm like, divine intervention again. I'm supposed to catch this fish. So I send it out there, send the lure out there again. And what I do, a little tip for you guys, and kind of learn something here on this. Sometimes if I'm in the marshes and I see that real short grass, I'll actually cast into the grass and then just pull the lure out so it lands softer. So that's what I did. I cast in the grass, just pulled it out, it landed softer. I saw that weight come by, and it just pounced on that lure, set the hook, and I'm not that guy that's screaming and yelling on camera. That's just not who I am. But that was the most excited I think I've ever been in my life. And to this day, I will say that fish, I did land that fish. That fish is probably my favorite and most important fish that I've ever caught in my entire life.
Wow.
And that it proved that I could do it. That's what it was. It solidified that the decisions that I made and what I learned and, from doing what I was doing, that I could do this. And, I went down to, from there, I went down to Texas. I had one of my best redfish days. The next week I caught 30 redfish in 2 hours. I left them chewing. Then I went up to Baffin a month later. I caught my biggest trout at Baffin, which, I can't say it's 30 inches. I didn't measure it. But I've caught some 28 and a halves, and this was definitely bigger than that one. And, again, this is just using the same techniques that I've learned in the community. I'm using 2.0s. I'm using Power Prawn Juniors, and I'm just going through and doing all the things that needed to be done, all the things that I learned how to do through the community and through the regional maps and the posts and the reports and everything. And, and I literally did do that. The goal of hitting a redfish in all 9 states being self-guided, I fulfilled that. I was able to catch a fish, by myself, finding my spots with my lures in each one of the nine states.
So cool. What state was the toughest for you?
Georgia. And it's not necessarily because the fishing is tough. It was the accessibility to a kayak. The thing about Georgia is the water, the rivers there. Well, first off, there's, a 9 or a 10-foot tide swing. There's a big tide swing. And the kayak accessibility is an issue. So if I had a boat, it probably would have been a little easier to get back and forth to the spots. At the time of the year that I was in Georgia, the fish were still kind of by the big water, but there's no kayak launches close to the big water. So I had to improvise and make some stuff, launch out at the islands. I wind up catching some over at Jekyll because it was close to the big water and I was able to get to it. But it was challenging. Georgia was definitely challenging.
I think that's another point that we didn't make earlier. As you were doing this journey, there was no boat involved. This is all kayak and or land-based, and some are weight fishing in some cases, or fishing from shore. That's phenomenal. So Georgia was the toughest. And it sounds like Texas, you had some of the most epic days at 30 redfish in a couple hours. And
Texas was amazing. I mean, there's each one of these states. I get the question a lot, which one was my favorite state? It's hard to really answer because each one of these states, believe it or not, every one of them has their own little gem. Like there's some great fishing all over the country. I love Texas. It was great. Going to, Louisiana's, it's epic. It's amazing there. Alabama, believe it or not, even though their coastline is not very big, the inshore fishing is outstanding. Mississippi, that's a hidden gem that a lot of people won't realize. Mississippi is great. Of course, Florida, and even going up to the coast, I love North Carolina. One thing that, that's really surprised me, and I don't know why. I guess maybe being, a little, not really paying attention to it, but Virginia. Virginia is amazing. I loved Virginia, but all of them are great. North Carolina, South Carolina, they're all great fishing. It really is.
Well, I'd like to ask you how you use the app. It sounds like you're using all the stuff you learned in the course. It's a little bit tougher to explain, but what features do you use wherever you are, regardless of any of those states? What was something that, I always went to this first to see what was on there?
So whenever I first hit the road, we didn't have smart spots. So I was still using satellite image, and I was using community posts. So
we didn't even have the desktop version then.
No.
Okay.
No. It wasn't until North Carolina until the desktop version came out. Uh-huh. And to be honest with you, that really helped me out a lot, to be honest with you. It made things easier. But before that, I was doing the satellite images using the community posts. But what happened was when we first got smart fishing spots, it was very, I don't want to say that make it sound bad, but compared to what it is now, it was kind of rudimentary. We had some, we had smart spots map. We started getting the seagrass layers. We started getting the oyster layers, and that's exactly what I would do. I don't think we had shaded relief back then. I think that was until later. So yeah, basically what I was doing is I was using that satellite image in the smart spots. And then, I was playing to my strengths. I'm not going to say that I was going out there and changing my fishing style. And this is another tip that you can do. So when you go on vacation, if you're going to a place that you've never been to before, you've never fished there, play to your strengths. So I'm good with marsh fishing. I can go, I'm pretty confident I can go to any marsh and I can put some fish in the boat. So that's the places that I would go to first off in an area. I'm not really great in inlets because, I fish out of a kayak, so I'm not really in inlets or not. So I'm not going to go up to, an inlet in a state I've never been to and try to learn how to do that, in a place that I've never been to. So like South Carolina, I would go to Murrells Inlet, which is, it's got the inlet itself, but it went into a big marshy area. And I was right at home there. I was able to fish that. So if you do go on vacation to a place you've never been before, just play to your strengths.
I love that. Cool. What else? Any other big aha moments or things that you learned or wish you had known in your younger years?
Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like, of course you wish you learned earlier, but really, for me, it's the sense of community, being able to ask a question and then get an answer. And it's not snarky or it's not, I just use a search feature. We don't have that. So anytime I was in an area, I could post or even direct message somebody that, that I knew that knew the area. And I was able to get an answer, back and get some really good information. And I was able to meet just a ton of nice people out there. Like I will say this, you got to be careful about, the news is always doom and gloom, and, they're trying to, because, that kind of stuff sells, it makes the fear sells. But small town America is alive and well. It's great. There's so many great people out there. Yeah. I've met so many nice people, and, don't be afraid to get out there and travel. And don't be afraid to get out there and just ask for some help. There's so many people out there that want to give you the help. But yeah, there's so many different ways to go out there and catch fish. Like I said, we were in a kayak. I've had the question, well, do you wish you had a boat? Well, yes and no, but you don't necessarily have to have a boat. You don't necessarily have a kayak. I caught some really nice fish with my feet planted right on the ground. So it's pretty cool. Just get out there and just don't be afraid to do it.
I love it. Well, cool. If you guys want to spend more time with Pat, we're doing live Q&A now with our coaches every single Thursday. That's part of the Insider Club. And if you haven't heard, we're going to be raising the prices significantly, especially on some of the live parts of what we do in terms of like more one-on-one and group coaching. So definitely get in now before those prices go up. The good news, if you're listening and you're already a member, we are not raising the prices on you. That's one of our brand promises and always has been, that once you're in, as long as you're an active member, meaning still a paying member, then you're locked in and grandfathered into that rate for life. And I do believe what you said is probably one of the secret sauces, meaning community and network, that doesn't get enough attention. Most people think, oh, it's some magic lure, it's some special honey hole or an app or whatever. But yeah, that network has come up over and over and over again. I had Ken Hickman on, who is, a tournament angler. I mean, legit was traveling around in these tournaments, and now is the director of the Power Pole Redfish series, which is the biggest, I think, highest paying redfish tournament out there. And he said that same thing. He's like, man, if you got a new spot, you're only as good as your network, I believe is how he phrased it. He's like, you have, and they're not going to tell you where to fish. He's like, very rarely does someone say, oh, here's some GPS spots, but they're just telling you the trends that, hey, yeah, the redfish are pushed up here on oyster bars, or they're pushed far off. There's a front they came through, or they're chasing mullet in 2 to 3 feet of water. So they're just giving you just enough of a head start that you know to look for those types of spots, but not exact GPS spots. So I think if you don't have a community or network, come join us. We have some of the most friendly, awesome, amazing, loving, and positive people I've ever met in a fishing community. And part of it has been our rules, right, Pat? You've been around for a while, and it's one thing to have rules. And like ours, for instance, is like no cursing, no negativity, no bullying, no belittling, any of that. A lot of groups can say that, but they kind of turn their head to some of it. We don't. I mean, we've kicked people out. We've refunded people's money. No questions asked. You're done. The second you break those rules, we just don't tolerate it. And I think because of that, our members know that we have their backs, that they're not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to share. They're not afraid for someone to come out and start saying some snarky stuff like happens on the Facebook group. So come join us. It really is just an amazing community. And as Kent said, you're only as good as your network. So thank you, Pat. Like I said, love everything you do. Love the story. I learned a little bit today too, because I didn't know a couple of those stories. And yeah, that redfish one in Louisiana, that gave me goosebumps, man. That was awesome.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me. There's a ton more to be made, right? It's all about making memories.
That's it. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on the podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe there. And ultimately, come join us over at the Insider Club at saltstrong.com. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.